Good afternoon, and welcome to True Crime Mysteries. If you're new to the channel, hello and welcome, and if you're returning, welcome back. Today we're discussing 3 affairs that ended in tragedy. But first, I want to let you know that this video is sponsored by BetterHelp. More on that in a minute, but with that being said, let's get into it. Number 1. Meredith Chapman. When Meredith Chapman offered a job interview to Mark Gerardo, she had no idea what the coming months would bring. The highly accomplished 33-year-old was a senior director for marketing at the University of Delaware, voted as being one to watch by 40 Under 40 for having a successful academic career as well as political. Meredith seemed poised for an esteemed career. When Meredith met Mark in person for the interview, there was immediate chemistry. She hired Mark and the two began working closely together, which was a problem because both she and Mark were married. In the coming weeks, the two would get closer and closer, eventually becoming more than friends. Mark, 48, had been married to his wife for 24 years, and he described his marriage as difficult. He had met Cherie Cox in 1986 in Fort Wayne, Indiana. They'd both been teens when they first met. Then the two went off to college where they both pursued a career in marketing. They met again in the early 90s, and this time they started dating. The two had said they'd been madly in love, and they got married in 93. Close friends of the couple noted that the marriage wasn't perfect. They described disagreements between the couple as intense, and it was usually Cherie who was the victor of any argument. Cherie had a big personality, she was outspoken and competitive, whereas Mark was more quiet, shy, and reserved. Money grew to be a constant issue for the couple. Cherie worked for private companies in marketing, whereas Mark worked in colleges and universities. The 2008 recession decimated Cherie's career, and she found herself unemployed and unhireable when most companies were scaling back. When things started looking up from the recession, Cherie struggled to get back on her feet, bouncing from company to company. Mark's new job opportunity in Delaware saw the couple sell their house and move from South Carolina to the East Coast. Mark went first, leaving Cherie behind to sell the house, and he started at his new job right away. While Cherie was in South Carolina, Mark was in Delaware with Meredith, and things quickly started to heat up between the two. Cherie joined her husband in Delaware, and had already been suspicious that her husband was having an affair. To confirm her suspicions, she sewed recording devices into Mark's pockets, eventually confronting him with the recordings of their conversations. She had 12 notebooks of handwritten transcripts from the recording devices, all of Mark's conversations. Mark and Cherie began discussions about ending their marriage, where Meredith separated from her husband of 9 years. Meredith got a new job in Pennsylvania and started making plans with Mark to be together. Cherie's anger about Mark moving on with a younger, prettier, more successful woman than herself started to boil over. Mark said at one point Cherie had threatened to throw herself out of a window. She met with a divorce counselor who noted it wasn't an unusual reaction, and she said that Cherie shared feelings about being traded in and abandoned. Cherie had been most concerned about where the divorce would leave her financially, but she also loved Mark and didn't want to separate. She wanted to work things out. No one could have predicted what was about to happen. On April 21st, 2018, a neighbor of Meredith's in Radnor, Pennsylvania, noted something odd. There was a woman with a grim, concerned, or worried expression standing near her driveway. The woman was using binoculars to look in the direction of her new neighbor's home. The woman eventually got into a black SUV and drove off. She noted the incident as strange, but didn't think much about it, and didn't report the incident to the police or mention it to anyone until days later. Unbeknownst to Mark, Cherie went out and purchased a gun. She started going to shooting ranges near their home. Mark and Cherie had agreed to meet for dinner to go over some things regarding their soon-to-end marriage on April 23rd. Mark arrived at the restaurant and waited, but Cherie never showed up. He then started receiving concerning text messages from Cherie like, "You ruined my life. I hope you never find happiness." And the final one read, "Bye, Mark." He then became increasingly concerned when Meredith didn't answer her phone and decided to go over to her house. He had prepared for some sort of altercation or confrontation with the two women. He wasn't prepared for what was at the home. he discovered the bodies of Meredith Chapman and Cherie Girardeau. Cherie had meticulously planned the murder for weeks. She had placed a GPS tracking device on both Mark and Meredith's vehicles. She had placed an app on Mark's phone that duplicated everything he did, mirroring it onto her phone. In the SUV she had rented, there had been binoculars, latex gloves, ammunition, and a wig. Now, I would like to take a minute to talk about today's sponsor, BetterHelp. Is there something interfering with your happiness or preventing you from achieving your goals? This last year has been a roller coaster in so many ways, and it is totally normal to work on those emotional twists and turns. BetterHelp will assess your needs and match you with your own licensed professional therapist, and you can start communicating in as little as 48 hours. It is super easy. You take a quick questionnaire and get matched to one of BetterHelp's network of over 20,000 therapists. It is available to clients worldwide, and they do their best to match you with someone as locally as possible. You can log into your account anytime and message your therapist. In addition to the messaging, you can schedule weekly video sessions or phone sessions, so you don't have to sit in a waiting room or commute to an appointment. BetterHelp is committed to helping you find the perfect someone you are comfortable with, and it is free and easy to change therapists if necessary. BetterHelp is more affordable than traditional in-office therapy, and financial aid is available if needed. BetterHelp wants you to start living a happier life today. BetterHelp is not a crisis line, it isn't self-help, it is a way to get professional therapy done securely online. Check out my link, betterhelp.com/TCM, and use my code TCM to get 10% off your first month and get started today. That is betterhelp.com/TCM to get 10% off. Join over 2 million people taking charge of their mental health with the help of experienced professionals. Thank you again to BetterHelp for sponsoring this video. Number 2. Bruce Miller. It was in 1999 when Bruce Miller would meet the woman that would become his fourth wife. Bruce, born and raised in Flint, Michigan, had worked hard his whole life. He had worked his way up at General Motors and was soon to retire. He also owned and ran an auto salvage yard, which he looked forward to spending more time on once he retired from GM. Bruce had been married 3 times before he met Cherie. Cherie was almost half his age and had 3 young children. He had been apprehensive about the relationship, but things escalated quickly, with Cherie moving into his home with her children only months after meeting. 4 months later, they eloped in Las Vegas. Despite the age gap, the couple seemed to have a loving relationship. Bruce treated Cherie's children as his own. He was a loving and stable husband and father figure. Compared to Cherie's previous husbands, Bruce was financially secure and was quite the catch. Cherie seemed to enjoy her new life, especially her new husband's money. She went on spending sprees. She maxed out credit cards, secretly signed Bruce up for new ones, and started putting Bruce into debt. Cherie worked as a Mary Kay makeup consultant and wasn't pulling in much of an income herself, leaving Bruce to pick up the tab on her new lavish lifestyle. Bruce wasn't home very much. He worked his full-time job at GM and then would go down to the salvage yard to put in another full day's work, often working well after dark. Cherie occupied time at home on the family computer, spending hours and hours in online chat rooms on AOL. Cherie and Bruce hadn't been married long when Cherie started an online relationship with Jerry Cassidy, an ex-cop who worked at a casino in Reno. Jerry was recently divorced and quite lost. He had been an accomplished police officer, but he'd had to leave after cooperating with an investigator for corruption at his precinct. The investigation had led to several officers being fired, and his once esteemed career was tainted, and he left it behind. When Jerry met Cherie online, the two immediately hit it off, and the conversations quickly turned steamy. Cherie told him that she was a wealthy business owner and told him a story that her husband was in poor health and she was set to inherit a substantial amount of money. Cherie had woven a completely fictitious tale for Jerry. For her, it was a game. Eventually, the two get the opportunity to take things into real life when she goes to a Mary Kay convention held in Reno, and the two meet up. They spend the weekend together, and it turned into a full-blown affair. When Cherie returned home, she and Jerry continued to message constantly. Jerry believed every lie that Cherie had told him, and he believed the two were going to be together. Soon after their encounter in Reno, Cherie revealed she was pregnant. This was another lie. Cherie wasn't able to conceive. Her tubes had been tied after the birth of her third child. Jerry was ecstatic about the pregnancy. He told all his co-workers he was expecting and told them all about the plans he and Cherie had together. Suddenly, Cherie emailed him saying that her husband had found out about their affair and he'd beaten her up and she lost their baby. This sent Jerry into a spiral of depression. Jerry had a problem with drinking, but his tumultuous relationship with Cherie had made things significantly worse. Over the next few months, Cherie continued visiting Jerry in Reno, manipulating him into believing her seemingly endless lies and convincing him that they were going to have this beautiful life once she left her husband. She told him that her husband was in the mafia and he was dangerous. She then told Jerry she was pregnant with twins and sent him sonograms. She let him get excited about the birth of their children and again crushed him by saying her husband had beat her so badly she had miscarried, sending him fake pictures of her body covered in bruises. This was when she channeled his anger into action. She hatched a plan to have Jerry drive up to Michigan and murder her husband to get back at him for killing their fictitious children. Jerry had no idea that this was all a lie and he was being played. On November 8, 1999, Jerry followed Cherie's instructions to the letter. They spoke moments before Jerry walked into Bruce's salvage yard office with a shotgun and shot Bruce. Cherie had played her part as well, having orchestrated the entire murder. She waited a few hours and then called her brother-in-law, concerned that Bruce was late. She asked him to look for him at the salvage yard. He did, and it was there that he found his brother dead. Officers made the death notification, and initially there hadn't been any concern about Cherie. They felt that she had reacted appropriately, and it appeared that had been a robbery gone wrong, and was investigated as such. Their main suspect ultimately ended up being Bruce's friend, who also worked at the salvage yard. Those close to the family were concerned. Cherie in private didn't seem upset about Bruce's death. Only days after his murder, she was seen dancing at a bar. 2 weeks after his funeral, Cherie had a boyfriend move into Bruce's home, and it wasn't Jerry. After Jerry murdered Bruce, Cherie confessed to all the lies she had told. Bruce hadn't been the abusive mob boss husband that she had painted him to be, and Jerry had murdered an innocent man. After her confession, she stopped communication with Jerry, and he realized the gravity of what he had done, and it was for nothing. 3 months after Bruce Miller's murder, the Flint PD got a strange call. A man 700 miles away in Odessa, Missouri, had committed suicide and had left a briefcase with the confession to murdering Bruce Miller. It had been Jerry, and not only did he confess, but he also placed the blame squarely on Cherie. Law enforcement then arrested her, and she was charged with first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. She had deleted all communication with Jerry from her computer, but Jerry hadn't off of his computer, and law enforcement had thousands of email communications between the two, which included the detailed plot to have Jerry murder Bruce. Cherie's trial started on December 12, 2000. It was the first trial based on evidence collected via the internet. Though it was circumstantial, the evidence against Cherie was damning. When she took the stand, she was emotionless, stone-faced, and maintained her innocence, despite the evidence before her. She tried to convince the jury that she thought it all had been a fantasy that Jerry was in on, and she never believed he would do it. The jury didn't buy it, and after 2 days of deliberation, they came back with a guilty verdict of Cherie Miller, and she was sentenced to life in prison for first-degree premeditated murder. Cherie maintained that she was innocent until recently in 2017. She wrote a letter to the judge before an upcoming appeal date, saying she would not appeal because she was guilty and she deserved to be in prison. After nearly 2 decades, she finally apologized to the Miller family, as well as Jerry's family. In the letter, she also revealed what had been her motivation for having Bruce killed. She said it was because Bruce had been close to finding out who she really was. Number 3. Bill Hall Jr. Bill Hall Jr. was born in July 1963 in Bexar, Texas. He met Frances in high school, and the two started a relationship where they fell madly in love. The two married at 18 and started their lives with very humble beginnings. Bill worked for his aunt at a trucking company while Frances worked odd jobs. The two started a family right away, first a daughter and then a son, and the family was very happy. Bill had always wanted to be a successful entrepreneur and gave his kids the world. He learned the trucking business from the ground up, and in the early 80s, he and Frances bought their first truck and started Bill Hall Jr. Trucking. In under a decade, Bill and Frances grew the company into a multi-million-dollar empire, becoming the largest trucking company in Texas. From the outside, Bill and Frances had an unwavering marriage. They ran their company together, raised 2 kids into adults, had a beautiful home, and seemingly had an amazing life. However, those closest to Bill knew the marriage wasn't perfect. Bill had a larger-than-life personality and liked to throw around money when he went out with his friends, which attracted a certain crowd. Bill loved going to Las Vegas, partying, and women. This had been an ongoing issue in his marriage, but Frances seemed to stick by Bill through it all. She stated that she loved him and had been willing to work it out. One of his affairs is what ultimately led to his death in October 2013. Bill had met Bonnie Contreras, a former exotic dancer, and for 3 years Bill carried on with a double life. Bill showered Bonnie with expensive gifts, paying her rent, buying her vehicles, vacations, and plastic surgery. Bonnie, who was 28 when they met, was nearly half Bill's age. Bill and Bonnie had a rocky relationship. They had broken up several times for a multitude of reasons. Sometimes it was Bill's marriage, sometimes it was Bonnie's temper. According to Bonnie, she had said that Bill told her he would divorce Frances so that he could marry her and have children. But after waiting for years, this seemed less and less likely. Bill's friends said that he'd lost interest in Bonnie in 2013. The relationship was too much of a roller coaster for him, and he ended things. In a text message, Bonnie sent several messages threatening to tell Frances about the affair. According to Bill's close friends, this had been a common tactic for Bonnie when she wasn't getting her way, but this time it didn't work and Bill continued to ignore her. This caused Bonnie to call Frances and tell her about the affair. Not only that, but she also started sending Frances explicit photos and videos of her with Bill. Frances and Bill had a full blown-out argument. Frances fully admits that she broke Bill's phone and several decor items in the house that had been smashed from Frances throwing them. She said that she'd been hurt, angry, and betrayed. This also prompted a war of words between the two women. Both sent vitriolic messages back and forth, and this went on for weeks. According to Frances, she'd had enough and told Bill to leave, and when he left, he went back to Bonnie. On October 10, 2013, several calls were made to a Texas 911 dispatch reporting that 2 SUVs were racing on a 2-lane highway. Minutes passed when other calls start coming in saying that a man driving a motorcycle needed medical attention and had been hit by an SUV. Upon arriving on the scene, authorities found that Bill had been thrown from his Harley-Davidson. Bill hadn't been wearing a helmet, so he suffered extensive head trauma. While being rushed to the hospital via helicopter, Bill died at 50 years old. Officers began investigation and soon learned that the victim's wife and mistress were both at the scene, and his wife had vehicle damage that was consistent with an accident. Frances was arrested and taken into police custody. While talking to the police, Frances said that she was returning from a niece's volleyball game when she passed her husband Bill on his motorcycle, and then moments later, noticed the vehicle that Bill had just purchased being driven by a woman who she had assumed was her husband's mistress. Frances claimed she only wanted to confront Bonnie and tell her to leave her alone, and turned around and attempted to follow them. Of course, Bonnie's story is quite different from Frances' story. She said that Frances proceeded to hit her in the back of the vehicle with her vehicle at least 15 times. At some point during this encounter, Bill got in between the two vehicles, and that is when Frances hit him from behind and still pursued Bonnie. Frances continued to contradict Bonnie's story. She claimed it was an accident. Frances states that she was trying to pull Bonnie over to confront her about the constant harassment. She then stated that Bill was in front and he had let 2 vehicles pass him. Frances said that Bonnie hit the brakes, and this caused a chain reaction that caused Bill to make contact with Frances' vehicle. It appeared that Frances had sideswiped Bill, and that he veered off the road and went over his bike's handlebars, hitting the pavement. Frances maintains that she didn't know Bill had been run off the road or had collided with her vehicle. She said she saw dust and couldn't see Bill's bike anymore, and when she couldn't see him, she turned around. Frances was charged with murder and held without bail. She found out Bill had died while detained. At the trial in 2016, an expert testified that Bill did indeed strike Frances's rear window trying to avoid a collision. He said nothing on Frances or Bill's vehicle indicated any foul play, that it was merely an accident. However, a jury thought differently and sentenced Frances to concurrent sentences of 2 years each, one for the murder charge and the other for the aggravated assault with a deadly weapon charge.
Cries in the courtroom tonight after the verdict is read. Frances Hall found guilty of running her husband, Bill Hall, off the road and killing him.
The jurors taking more than 6 hours to reach that verdict today. The night team's Courtney Friedman was there as the emotional events unfolded. She joins us live now from the Bexar County Courthouse. Courtney?
In that courtroom filled with Frances Hall's loved ones, it was tense and emotional series of moments as those two verdicts were read out loud. The most emotional person in the room was Frances Hall herself.
Oh, please. I haven't seen my babies, please.
This lenient sentencing was due to Frances' defense team arguing that this was a crime of passion and she was not thinking clearly. She was ultimately sentenced to 2 years in prison and had to pay a $10,000 fine.
We're very surprised by the verdict. We're very shocked and disappointed in the verdict. We believe in our client. We believe in the case we put on. We're just extremely disappointed.
Frances was released from prison in 2018. In an interview with News 4 San Antonio, Frances stated, "Did I murder my husband? No. I can't even bring myself to say that word. Did I go after her and want to confront her? Yes. And that I regret for the rest of my life. I've paid my debt to society, I've done my time." She also went on to say that she would like to someday be an advocate for women who were imprisoned. Well, that is it for this video. As always, thank you so much for watching. If you like this content and what I do over here, please don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell notification so you don't miss my next upload. As always, if you give this video a like if you enjoyed the content, that would be much appreciated as it helps the channel to grow. We also have channel membership and Patreon if you want to get more exclusive content or just to support the channel. You will also find in the description box links to all my socials to connect with me, as well as other goodies. But that is it for me. Thank you so much for being here. I will see you on the next one. Bye for now.